In this video, we're going to look at the next model from the Bible in Lothring's quest for the form of the people of God as a nation state. So the historical period that corresponds to this period in the Israelite narrative would be from around 1000 BC to about 587 BC. Now, it's not all simple and united nation states in that story. We start off with King David. He's acknowledged as the first king of all the tribes of Israel, all 12 tribes. He is said in some ways to unite the tribes. Now, we know the tribes are already united in a loose confederacy, and before David there was actually a man named Saul who was anointed as the leader or commander of Israel. But David seems to be the person who is understood to be the first king of Israel. The picture here is a statue of King David from a Roman basilica. Now, the kingdom of all 12 tribes didn't last that long. It was only about 70 years. Under David's successors, the kingdom quickly split. And we'll look at some of the problems associated with kings, the kind of problems that led many of the proto-Israelites and early Israelites to leave the kingdoms of the Canaanite city-states and leave Egypt, led to the northern tribe leaving David's kingdom, splitting off from the capital city of Jerusalem and the capital province, so to speak, of Judah. So those northern tribes, which took the name of Israel, they existed then autonomously for about 200 years. They were their own kingdom with their own set of kings. But they were then defeated by the Assyrians in 722 BC. Now the southern tribes, which was Judah basically, and the smaller tribe of Benjamin, they continued to exist for about another 150 years before they were defeated by the Babylonians, which was the Babylonian exile period, which led to a lot of the finalizations and writings in the Torah that we have today. So the Torah, which we'll talk about in a later model, actually came into being during this exile period, the exilic and post-exilic period, is where we get a lot of these writings that we're basing these models on. So the question we have to ask after, looking at this history of Israel throughout this course, knowing that the Israelites were founded as a people who escaped from the tyranny of kings, right? They were peasants and slaves who abandoned or even rebelled against the Canaanite city-state. Why, after 200 years of freedom, 200 years of people not enslaving them, 200 years of their land rights being respected, 200 years of not being taxed, 200 years of not having their children taken to serve in the palaces and conscripted into the army. Why did they want their own king? The the writer of the Deuteronomistic book, is very critical of the king. I mean, they have this period of the Israelite history included in their stories of themselves, right? The stories of themselves that they formed during the exile. They wanted their children to resist assimilation and to know who they were. And so this period of kings, they did have these kings. It was an important part of their history. They didn't just throw it out, but they're very critical of it. We can even see here in First Samuel, God has Samuel warn the people of what will happen if they choose to have a king. And he tells them all the things that happen to them. That he's going to tax you. He's going to Take your crops that you've worked so hard to grow, and take a good portion from it. Even a point where he would enslave them, basically. In other words, he's saying you're going back to the oppressive situation that I freed you from when I freed you from slavery in Egypt. And again, Deuteronistic writers, they see this choice to take a king by their ancestors, by their predecessors, as a rejection of God. Again, I don't know if we can state that too strongly, that the Israelite identity for the Deuteronistic writers is the people who are freed by God from the tyranny and oppression of kings. Right? Israel is not supposed to be a nation like other nations. They're not supposed to be a nation in which the self-interest of the powerful elite are posed as religion. Right? It's not supposed to be a place where you worship the king, worship the state, or worship the desires of the king, state, nobility, or whatever power elite you have. They're not supposed to be a nation where the poor are here to serve the rich. No, Israel is different. Israel is supposed to be a community of free and loving persons. Right? Yahweh, right, the God of Israel, is a God who cares for the poor. So Samuel talks to the Lord in uh, the first book of Samuel, and he tells them they want a king, and he said, well, don't take it personally. It's not because you're not doing a good job. And they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. They're rejecting God by choosing a king. Right? They're acting towards you just as they have acted to me from the day I brought them up from Egypt to this very day, deserting me to serve other gods. And again, this isn't just that he's like, oh, you're serving these other gods instead of me. They're not all the same. Right? The Israelite God is different. He's a God who cares for every person, especially those who are poor and vulnerable. Right? Not like the Egyptian gods, not like the Canaanite gods, not like the Babylonian gods, the Mesopotamian gods, right? Those gods are related to the rich. Mm-hmm. And their interests become the religion. Think about it in Enuma Elish. Why are people even created? They're created to be slaves of the gods. And the kings then take on the divine role, right? That's not what Israel is supposed to be like. No, Israel is God's people, all of them. Even the foreigners, right, are treated as children of God, according to the Torah anyway. But anyway, the people insist on having a king. Now, why do they want to have another king? Why do they want a king? Why would they want to go back into this kind of slavery that they had been freed from? Right? Why would they go against their own foundation? Well, they tell you in First Samuel 1. The Deuteronistic writers record this as saying there must be a king over us, and they use these words. These are just a great condemnation. We too must be like all the nations. What? For the king to rule them, lead us in warfare. So there's a hint there. We'll look at it, but just to review again, when they're doing this, they're saying we're just going to be like everybody else now. We're going to have a fusion of God and state, right? That the desires of the ruling elite are going to be substituted for the will of God. Religion, in the negative sense that Loping uses it, is going to be replacing revelation. And you're going to have forced labor and social classes and oppression of the poor and all that stuff that's going to go with it. But guess what? They want one. Why? Well, we'll get to that. So this slide, I'm just talking about the stuff that I talked about already. Again, you're just becoming like the new Egypt. They're just becoming like the new Canaanite city-state, right? Now, the people who are writing this are looking back, right? They're in Babylon. Yeah, Babylon has its issues too. So let me just jump back here, right? So this is the big issue that Lofink sees with this model. He obviously is not a fan of it. Guess what? The biblical writers weren't a fan of it either. Okay, so just let me cut in here with why they wanted to have a king. Let me jump back a couple slides here. Here we go, back in chapter 8 of 1 Samuel. No, there must be a king over us. We too must be like other nations, with a king to rule us, to lead us in warfare, to fight our battles. And that really was the big issue. They were under a lot of military pressure. A new group of people had come into the Near East, the Philistines. They had iron weapons, which were better than the bronze weapons that most other people there had. They also had professional army. Um, they were kind of just routing the place militarily. And so the Israelites said, they didn't know if they could continue under this model that they had with the Confederacy. They didn't know if they could just rally up volunteers to come fight off these attacks from the Philistines. And so they thought, we're going to need a king for that. And so that was the main reason. And they tell you right there, we need a king to rule us, to lead us in warfare, to fight our battle. Right? They wanted someone to fight their battles for them. And, it might have been the only way for them to actually defend themselves militarily at this point, because the Philistines were such an ominous threat. Regardless, the hedonistic writers are not fans of this, and I don't really think Lofink was a fan of this period either. He did see one good thing in it, though. Right now, here on this slide, we just have a review of the issues that he has with it, which I think we dealt with quite well already. They're just going to be like everybody else now. Where they have these class distinctions. The powerful and the rich are going to oppress the poor and the vulnerable, and the self-interest of the state or the nobility of the ruling class are going to be substituted for the will of God. And you're going to have all those oppressive things, forced military service, enslaving the poor, right? And especially this one, that was just the rich taking the land away from small farmers. I mean, that was what made Israel. They said, we're not going to sit here and sharecrop with a king anymore, right? And so they just left. Going back to the foundation of Israel, right? Many of the founding members of the Israelite nation, they were peasants who abandoned the Canaanite city-state and went to farm for themselves in the hill country. Like, they were joined by this group that escaped out of slavery in Egypt. But when 200 years later, right, they want to make themselves a king, guess what? That king is going to start to eat up their land and start to give it to the other nobles to secure his power base. And they really are, facing the wrath of God, as we saw in the earlier chapter. And this is what Samuel was telling them. Go ahead and do this, right? But if you do it, what's the consequence going to be? You're going to be enslaved, just like we used to be. And he says, when God calls out, when you call out to God, he's not going to hear you, right? Because he is going to let you suffer the consequences of your own actions. And again, it doesn't take long. The nation only lasts some 70 years before it split. Now, as critical as he is, Lothing does see a good in this period, and that is the prophecy of the Messiah, right? That there was hope for someone who could be a true king of Israel. Now, a true king of Israel would not be a king like other kings, right? A true king of Israel would be someone who shared the will of God, who shared the true revelation. In other words, he would be a defender of the poor, right? He would be a person who brought the Torah to life for the people. This hope in the just successor who would live entirely according to the will of God and would introduce a sight that's truly just. That prophecy is a prophecy of the anointed one, or the Messiah. Right? And we Christians see that prophecy fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. But that prophecy that the Messiah will come, right, this is still a reality for the religious life of the Jews today. Right? And definitely during this time, that was it. That was the planting of the seeds of this, looking forward, looking ahead to the day when a true king of Yahweh will come. One who will be a priest, prophet, and king, and who will be a servant of the people. One who will defend the rights of the poor. One who will live entirely according to the will of God.